welcome to our home learning provision and curriculum session this afternoon. I'm Jacqui Shepherd. I'm a lecturer in inclusive education at the University of Sussex, but I'm also a governor at Downsview Special School.
And I'm Freeborn, Deputy Head at Downsview School in Brighton, but I've also been working with curriculum and assessment for the past 7 years. In today's presentation, you'll be able to access three different modules. The first one we completed last year, and it was pre-COVID. And this is a kind of holistic approach to curriculum and assessment for SEND learners.
The second one is the result of research that I did with a colleague last summer at Sussex. And it was a survey across parents of children with special needs about how the experience of lockdown had been. But in particular, this video focuses on the learning from that first lockdown and how it informs how we structure home learning now.
And the last one is the home learning provision that we're currently offering at Downsview School and colleges. And I'll just give you an example of how we have evolved during these times, following obviously feedback from parents and teachers working together to develop this resource.
And we'll both be around later for the live Q&A if you have any questions about any of this. Look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the introduction is quite short today, and it will cover the areas of informative assessment that we think would be useful to share with you, and literally touching on just a very brief reminder of where we are in the policy context for SEND. We'll think about setting high expectations for SEND learners, the pathways that we've developed through the curriculum, the introduction to our skills ladders, baselines and target setting, evidencing progress, and then we'll just finish with a pointer towards some follow-up sessions that you can look at if you want any more detail on any of the areas that we touch on today. Okay, so just thinking for a moment about the recent policy context, it's quite important to get that snapshot of the SEN landscape because so much has happened across the last few years. We had the Children and Families Act and the SEND Code of Practice. The Children and Families Act bringing in those EHC plans for the first time, so that transition period onto EHC from statements, but also the SEN Code of Practice and that focus on wider long-term outcomes for our learners. The new national curriculum also happened in 2014, and we had to think about differentiating that for SEND learners. We had the Commission on Assessment Without Levels, which left us with no levels. And we were told that schools should consider meaningful ways of measuring all aspects of progress, including communication, social skills, physical development and independence. And you'll see some of that reflected in our discussion of skills ladders. We also had the Rochford Review, and obviously the implementation of that is still going on. The idea there was P scales were no longer fit for purpose for those students who are working below national curriculum level. And we've got the development of that engagement model in the 7 areas of learning. And as I say, that is still going ahead. The new Ofsted framework from 2018. So here we're having to think about curriculum intent, implementation and impact, all of which maps on to what we're talking about with our version of informative assessment. And we feel confident that we have an ambitious curriculum which meets the needs of all our learners.
Just before we go into what Downsview curriculum and assessment looks like, it's really important to get a little bit of generic information of who we are and how we started. Downsview currently has 2 schools and 2 colleges. We've got around 245 students with EHCP. We cover a range of moderate through to severe and profound learning disabilities and difficulties, and we merged with an SLD schools in 2018. Our colleges cater for ages, the Life Skill College cater for ages 16 to 19, and our Life Skill College goes from ages 19 to 22. Downsview has been judged as outstanding since 2009, and the last Ofsted inspection took place in February this year. For the past few years, we have been developing a personalised and holistic curriculum in which all parties that are involved with us pupil are able to contribute and be an active part of this working plan. I think for us, the main thing is that all our students, from the moment they walk into our schools or colleges, what we're aiming to do is to design an assessment that is going to develop their independence, their communication, and their ability to make choices. And we are going to do that through a variety of activities that are being thought through and discussed with parents and other professionals involved in this process. It's important to say that dignity and respect go throughout our teaching and our curriculum, and the main thing for us is to ensure that our students are having a happy life and that they are able to develop their skills further as possible.
So just picking up on that idea of setting high expectations for our SEND learners, it's really important that we always have that in mind when we're thinking about developing the curriculum, developing skills for them so that they can lead the best adult lives that they can. Obviously we have the national curriculum and we have to adapt and differentiate their access to the national curriculum, so that is an important part of our curriculum. Equally, we have the skills ladders, as we call them at Downsview, but these are the kinds of skills that you might imagine you would want to develop for your SEND learners, and we would want to ensure that our learners are active citizens and parts of their communities. Equally, we like to provide a range of learning opportunities to make sure that our learners don't just learn in the classroom, that they have experiences every day, that we build the learning into everything that they do. And all of this adds up together, we think, to create a very clear argument for our curriculum intent of how we bring all of those things together to work towards the individual progress for all of those learners. So thinking about the potential characteristics of our SEND learners, obviously we could come up with a much longer list than this, but just picking up on some of those ideas about social communication difficulties, sensory sensitivities, how our students generalise their learning or not from one context to another, how they might manage change and difficulty at the moment, how we develop their fine and gross motor skills, how we support them in planning and organisation, particularly important when they're in a period of transition, which many students will be on the return to school. Thinking about their special interests and attention to detail and how we can harness that to make the most of that. And also our students with social, emotional and mental health difficulties, and ensuring that we also have trauma-informed practice in our schools. And then alongside that, we have all of those things we're supporting them within school with our teachers and TAs. If we're lucky enough, we have outside support as well, maybe from educational psychologists, maybe from CAMS, physiotherapy, speech and language, and we'll have reports from all of those people feeding in to the sort of holistic picture of the child. And that's really important as well for our approach to informative assessment, how we bring everything together. So just drawing some of those ideas together and thinking about how we personalise the curriculum for all of our learners. And we think this maps on very clearly to the implementation and impact that Ofsted talk about. So everything that we do, the pedagogical approach, the curriculum content, the learning opportunities, the skills development, also the external interventions and therapies that we're doing, and then the individual goals and targets that we set for our children and young people come together to really focus what they're doing and help them to develop best in the ways that they can. And obviously this then feeds into the assessment and evidence that we can demonstrate for their progress. And in an ideal world, of course, our bar charts look like that, but for some of our learners, we have to work with their more spiky profiles. But again, the way in which we do this assessment really maps on to where we can go with their strengths and support them in their areas where they have more difficulty.
So on these slides, what you can see is our 3 learning pathways. When we started to change our curriculum and assessment, we identified the need for us to have a pathway to follow, to have a route, and to really understand how our students access learning. Those pathways are formed by core subjects. We need to ensure that we baseline our student across all those sections. We need to ensure that we can demonstrate progress and demonstrate learning, and by that we got a system that allows us to upload evidence as we go along, and by gathering all those evidence throughout the year, we are able to produce a learning journal. This learning journal contains all the progress that has been obtained for a specific period of time, and for us, we will be using that once a term. And it's a way to report to parents, but making it a bit more meaningful for them, instead of just getting a document with a few targets. So what these learning journals allow us is to show those targets with photographs that kind of show how those skills have been worked on, or how certain skills has been achieved.
For us, the engagement model is engraved throughout all our pathways. It's very important, and this is part of our discussion during progress meeting, that teachers really understand how each one of our students is able to access learning on a daily basis. So for example, if we look at the EDS pathway, the students that will access this pathway could be a student that has got PMLD or severe learning difficulties, but this pathway also assess the ability to use your gross motor skills and your fine motor skills. So we could have somebody that cognitively is accessing the external learning route. He must be accessing a high level of maths, a high level of English, but at the same time might be accessing an EDS pathway because of their gross and fine motor skills. So we can find that some of our students will be accessing one or two pathways at the same time. So this is a screenshot of our skills ladders. So for us, our skills ladders are those attributes or skills that all our students will require in order to have a fulfilled and happy life. By using those skills ladders, we are enabling them to become more independent, more communicative, and also to be able to generalize those skills that they learn in the classroom. What we identify is that self-regulation, collaboration, choice-making, problem-solving, and curiosity are directly linked with the ability to communicate, the ability to become independent, and also to make connection and generalizing. And in another presentation that we will do later on in the day, you'll be able to actually see those skills in more details and the contents of them.
So baseline and target setting are really central to this whole process. We have to ensure that the targets we set are ambitious and meaningful. Obviously, teachers and TAs' knowledge of students is really important, and that baseline assessment is critical. But also as a parent and as a governor, as a parent, I want to know that individually my child is being stretched and that he is being set targets that are going to develop him in the best way that he can, but also for the whole school, that children are being stretched and challenged in the things that they do. We also have professional support coming in from outside the school, which all feeds into that target setting and baselining. The areas of learning are challenged by the curriculum and assessment lead, Bea, who you've met on this video, and the deputies in the school before they're sent home to ensure that the expectations are high. Parents also get a chance to input and feed back on those targets because there may be very different things happening at home and they need to adjust those targets. There are review meetings, and obviously we try to incorporate student views wherever that's possible. And we build that into the EHC planning and review process. So we think it's a robust system that's in place, and it ensures we're looking at all aspects of development for each student. And on top of that, we can get more kind of quantitative data if we want. We can get numbers out of this. We can moderate across classes, across our different sites, but increasingly we are doing this with other schools.
This is a sample of the progress meeting that take place between teachers and the deputies in our schools. We tend to do these meetings 3 times a year at the beginning of the term, and this is a way that we got to kind of gather all relevant information that may have an impact on the students' education. For instance, by looking at this template, what we can see is that we discuss the learning pathways. This is where the student baseline is in terms of the core subject for math, English, communication, and PHAC. What we also do is we look at the skills ladders. We look at how those students are able to implement those skills and to generalize everything they learn within the classroom. We have added a new section which is about well-being. This is really important, and what we're discussing here, apart from the behavior strategies, we also discuss family situation and family dynamics that may affect the student's ability to make progress. And then we look at other factors that may affect learning, which is attendance and engagement. The engagement section is concentrate basically works around all the engagement profile that the government will release in September 2020, and Jacqui mentioned earlier. As well, during this progress meeting, what we're trying to do is to design a few strategies that will be necessary to implement across all settings in order for the student to make progress. And we look at things that may help the students, such as work as one-to-one, access specific therapies, and really look at the environment in terms of where do we facilitate those sessions for the students. So yeah, that's just giving us a general understanding of our progress meeting. Just picking up on one of the first slides that we were mentioning, it's really important for all our students and for our staff to have a clear view about where we want to be at the end of the school years or at the end of the college. And we like for our students to be involved in as much as possible in this process. We have designed a system in which in each one of our schools and colleges, the students are able to refer to visuals in order for them to really understand, for instance, what employability route they're going to take, what choices they're making, what options they have. And this is something that we are consistent across all our sites. At the same time, it's really important, as we mentioned earlier, that the students are actively involved in setting their own targets, they are aware of the progress they make. And we use these wow walls in all our classrooms. And during the day, teachers and TAs are able to make notes about progress they have seen during the day, and they stick it on the wall. And during the goodbye session at the end of the day, teachers will refer to this board, and each student will get feedback of the learning that took place that day. And this is for them to begin to understand what they have achieved and to prepare for the next steps. What we can see here is a quick overview of what we've been mentioning in previous slides. As we said earlier, it's really important to have a really clear and accurate baseline, and because from that baseline is how we write our areas of learning. What this slide is also showing that in order for us to have this accuracy in target setting, we need to get parents' input, we need to be very clear about which learning pathway our students are accessing, we need to be clear about their ability to implement those skills and generalize to other settings. And for some students, we will have to use some specialist support in order for us to be able to deliver an appropriate curriculum that meet the needs of our students. And it's just remembering that everything we do, the aim is to become independent adults, as independent as possible.
Okay, so today's been a very brief summary and overview of the whole approach to informative assessment, but there are follow-up sessions that you can look at. The second one being about those learning pathways that we mentioned, the early developmental stages, the mid-learning route and the extended learning route, and how they map on to our different learners, and equally how, taking account of those spiky profiles, they can work across those different routes. They don't just necessarily get stuck in one route. The third one is about assessment, so that's really demonstrating our evidence, how we share that evidence with teachers, with sites, with local authority, with schools, and how we capture that in something called Onwards and Upwards. We also have a whole session on the skills ladders and how they were arrived at and developed and refined to what we have today. And then finally, there's a whole case study of an individual learner, because it's quite helpful to see one person's journey through this whole process and what that might look like. So we hope that you'll find those useful and dip into some of those to support your own learning and development around this.
Okay, so welcome to this session called Learning from Lockdown, Children with Special Educational Needs and Disabilities. Christina Hancock and I did a survey last year where we spoke to, we got parents to respond to our survey about the experience of being in lockdown for their children and the things that they'd learned and things that had gone well as things that had been difficult. And we did a brief report from that last year, and we filmed something for Studio on that, which was called COVID and the Return to School. So it was all about helping schools prepare for and include those children when they came back to school. What I'm focusing on today is particularly thinking about the learning from lockdown, what went well, but in particular, what would help to support children with SEND now they're out of school again. So this was both Christina and I. Christina won't be on the video today because she's just got on maternity leave, so is otherwise occupied. But I want to start with just recapping on the background to the survey. As I say, you can look at the other video if you want the original details of the report. We had over 500 parent carers of children with SEND responding to the survey from various local authorities across the country. 69% of parent carers had children in mainstream education, 20% identified specialist and 10% other, and 50% were in primary, 38% in secondary, 6% in college and 6 other. So you can see that we've got quite a spread in primary and secondary. Equally, we had 50% of the parent carers of children with EHC plans, 38% did not have, 37% didn't have an EHC, and 13% were in that process of applying, which may well have fallen casualty of the current situation. And the reason we're doing this now is because we particularly asked this question: if schools were closed again in response to a second wave of infections, what do you think could be done differently to support your child? I don't think even we thought that this would actually happen at the time. So it's quite timely now to look at the responses to that question and to think about what could be done differently. And I want to start with a quote from one of the parents who said that, you know, if it happened again, they particularly wanted schools to see children with special educational needs. They were completely dropped from any plans, in my view, while my other mainstream child had a comprehensive education via Google Classrooms. My daughter received the occasional worksheet by post. It was wholly unacceptable. She should have received something on par with what my son received, and that was suited to her special educational needs. Now, obviously, schools were doing all sorts of different things, and some schools addressed children with special educational needs really well, really effectively. Others, according to parents, had, you know, different experiences. But I do want to start with the positives, because there were comments obviously about things that schools were doing brilliantly. Some parents commented that their children with SEND had been supported outstandingly, or that they were really well supported in that first lockdown. So some parents really had a positive experience. School did their utmost to support our daughter and said that she would not be penalised for not attending live lessons. They completely understand. Clear guidance and communication helps. It's been amazing so far. We've had excellent support from school. Regular contact on work set was appropriate. Another parent: the support I received was amazing. I want my child kept safe. And nothing could be improved on. They've been amazing. Provided clinical psychology support every week, weekly check-ins with his mentor. So lots of positives there, where schools were able to make sure that the SEN children were still seen and taken account of, and their needs met in all these different ways. Because the layering of difficulties in a normal day for an SEN child, you know, are huge. And then to suddenly have everything thrown back to home, obviously there are layers of difficulty attached to that, and there are different things that they're going to miss out on. For example, if they have one-to-one support, or if they have small group support, interventions, etc. So there's lots of things potentially that they're missing out on, as well as the classroom experience that other children would miss. And parent carers were very keen that any opportunity for their children with SEND to continue to attend school in some way would be really helpful. Part-time attendance would at least afford some structure and routine and enable some limited social interaction. And practice of social interaction is so important. So we know that it's not always safe for children to go into school, and we know that we can only have limited numbers in school at the moment. But in terms of those priority lists, trying to get children with SEND up that priority list would be really helpful. For some children with SEND, the ability to generalise context and therefore transfer their learning to the home context can be extremely challenging. And again, it's another of those layers that I mentioned that can add to the barriers that they have. So even though my son has an EHCP, he was getting minimal support from college. Another one: he needs to continue attending through lockdown in order not to lose focus. And another one: recognise that he is vulnerable and have him in school at least part-time. And as I say, I appreciate there are huge limitations at the moment, but where there are potential opportunities to go in for some of these children, it can be life-changing for the child and for the family supporting them. Personalising learning, obviously something we're very used to doing in school, and yet in lockdown it seems there was some losing sight of that. There were many comments about the individualised approach needed for children with SEND, that needed that differentiated learning, their individual needs to be recognised and adapted for, and appropriate support put in place to engage them. So differentiated learning, more regular check-ins to understand what they're struggling with, more online learning, some would argue for less, more teacher engagement, better differentiated work, basically someone caring about her education other than me. Another parent, more targeted and differentiated remote learning and live small group lessons. Differentiated work sent home that's actually appropriate, more access to video tutorials, more effort to ensure children still feel part of the school community through video messages, postcards, letters, emails, etc. And children being given appropriate work and better online classes and support weekly contact with SENCO and class teacher. And again, I know a lot of schools are doing these things, or that they are now preparing to do all of these things, having learnt from that first lockdown anyway. And online learning, obviously there were suggestions about improving that, because we were asking them what could be done better next time. And it's important to remember, for some children, online learning was absolutely fantastic and was their preferred learning style, if you like. And for some of them, being able to organise and structure their own day was really, really helpful. For others, it wasn't quite so helpful. So there was a clear call for more interactivity for online lessons. So rather than just recorded sessions, more interactivity, more opportunities to see the teacher and classmates, and improved online learning activities. So improving the interactivity in online lessons. There's a particular reference to mathletics in the next quote. If he was able to have virtual lessons, so maybe see a number of his classmates and all do a lesson together, I would ask him to agree a routine for every day. So if he still refused schoolwork, he would still have some structure. More Zoom meetings with teachers and classmates. The school needs to do similar to other schools, maybe offer Zoom lessons, keep regular contact with pupils, provide schoolwork to their academic ability. And again, remember, we've got a mixture of special and mainstream and primary and secondary schools reflected in some of these comments. And communication obviously was an important one. In particular, I think parents wanted better communication and more one-to-one online learning for their child to maintain that connection and help to improve the confidence with online learning. So more keeping in touch calls earlier in lockdown. So that initial just keeping in touch, making sure everyone's okay. One-to-one emotional support, and we know so many children are struggling with mental health at the moment, so anything we can do in terms of that emotional support would be really helpful. And more attempts to build confidence to engage virtually. Again, as I said, some children, it's their natural way of being. For others, it's more of a struggle. More direct personal contact with the teacher, so by telephone or Zoom, some teaching on Zoom. His EHCP adhered to, that he's communicated with and not forgotten. And live classrooms and support in real time, not just expecting them to access Google Classrooms. And alternatives to online teaching. As I say, great for some children, for others, possibly offering different methods of learning, as my child's very anxious about using remote communication and fear of hacking, and those real anxieties around the sort of cyber world which some children experience. And improvements to the worksheets sent home. They sent lovely creative teaching activity ideas, but A, they're just not doable with a toddler at home too and a husband working full time. And B, he responds better to worksheets where he can see the end point of the task. So that sort of structuring and sequencing sometimes of worksheets. And since March, this was in the previous lockdown, there's been no contact with teachers. And remember, we did this survey in the summer, and no support at all for kids who can't learn online. Less pressure on completing tasks, on more focus on checking individuals' well-being. So rather than just the sort of progress and attainment, thinking a bit more about the holistic child. And as I say, I'm sure a lot of people are doing all of this already, but it's just those reminders, isn't it, to think about. And there are just a few comments about children who access therapies, because that's another layer of things that they lose, that speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, physio, etc. So somehow can we deliver those therapies online? allowing children in small groups for a joint speech and language session, for example, or weekly OT exercises to continue. And then things like some of the classroom aids that they would normally have in class being sent home. Here we've got mention of a wobble cushion, but there may be other things like tactile pencils and things like that that could be sent home to help. The cat's joined in, I'm sorry. Speech and language on Zoom worked really well. My son seemed to know what to do straight away. So a really positive experience there of a speech and language Zoom or online lesson. So just in summary, trying to pull some of that together. Sorry about this. Communication, really important, especially to start with. So forming those early relationships and just showing that you're still thinking about those children with SEN. Schools have a lot to think about at the moment, and we've had very short notice for this lockdown. And so just that short phone call or email to just kind of let those children in particular know they've not been forgotten. And I'm sure you're doing it for all children anyway. The personalised learning, seeing the child and thinking about how their work and their curriculum would be differentiated and personalised while they're in school. How can we make sure that translates through to the home situation? And how can we think about the social support, the things they might be missing out on? And again, that's a real challenge. It's not something straightforward if you're not with your classmates every day, but opportunities to work in small groups and do all of those things. And I think we're a lot better placed this time and experienced with technology to do that. Interactivity within online teaching, also in worksheets, so thinking about all methods that we use. And then thinking creatively. I've mentioned some of the layers and the gaps that children with SEND might be missing out on, whether it's therapies, not having a teaching assistant that they might normally have access to, not having some of the aids they normally have access to, not seeing the SENCO, not going for intervention groups, not going for nurture groups. They're losing out on lots of different levels. And so any way we can think of, how can we supplement that creatively and reconstruct something in an online world? Again, I'm not saying it's easy. I think one thing I would say, as someone who works with trainee teachers who are all experiencing a very interesting PGCE year at the moment, anything that you can use them for, there are a lot of trainee teachers who want to get lots more experience. If you can get them on differentiating the worksheets, doing any of that work for you, it will be really good experience for them if you're a school that typically has trainees. So do use the people around you as well, because I'm sure there'd be, if I think about our trainees, they'd be really willing to do that. So that's in summary of really what I wanted to say. And I've included both Christina's details and mine, although you may not get an answer from Christina, as I say, the birth of her child is imminent. But do get in touch with us if you want any more detail, and really good luck with everything. I hope this lockdown goes well, and really appreciative as someone who has a son in special school of all the work that schools are doing. Thanks very much.
Okay. Welcome to the session today, which will give us a little bit of an idea of how remote learning has been taking place in our school during lockdown. What I'd like to present to you is a summary of the work that Downsview School has put together to explain home learning provision that we are offering for our students and their families. This slide will be particularly relevant for those of you that work in SEN settings, but it will be interesting as well for those professionals that would like to know a little bit more about the home learning provision offered for students with EHC plans. It's important to remember that our school and colleges work with a student with SLD and MLD. Today, I'm going to be taking a look at the recent development based on the result of the study that we have carried out since March 2020, where we had our first lockdown in the UK. And I have divided the presentation into three main parts. The first part will be concentrating on reflecting on the previous lockdown and what we learned from it. And consequently, it will allow us to be prepared for this current lockdown. The second part of the presentation, we will discuss how effective and how we were able to evaluate what we were offering. and also some top tips to plan a really effective home learning provision. And the last part of the presentation, just trying to give you a general overview of everything we're offering, and also some samples of how teachers have kind of developed this provision and adapted to individual needs. This slide to me shows one of the main key aspects of successful home learning provision. We needed to take on board how families, how students felt during the first lockdown in order to ensure that the planning for the next lockdown was effective. This is why it's really important, the research that Jacqui Shepherd did, which has been shared with you, to kind of get an overview of how the lockdown impacted in specific families. Another thing we were looking at was the platform we were using to deliver our learning. We needed to ensure that equality ran across our organization, and we needed to identify what resources family had in place and what we needed to put in place to support them. And with this in mind, we need to go to the last reflection point in here, which is the most important, is are we able to meet the EHC plans? We realized that some of our SLD population will need extra support, for instance, switches for communication, so we needed to put those in place and send home. Some of our SLD population use standard frame and walkers, so we need to ensure there was a way that we could deliver those to their home settings so parents will continue with some of those therapies and intervention programs. We have learned from previous experiences how to be prepared for this lockdown. You can see here 4 key areas. One of them is related to planning days and ensuring that teacher had the time to video resources, had the time to prepare presentations, and had the time to liaise with colleagues to share resources. That's a key factor in a successful provision. We have created in our school a shared folder where teachers from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 6 are allowed to see what other colleagues are sending home. And also it gives us a really good understanding of the progression, because we still need to ensure that there is progression through the key stages. With this in mind, we also have to set up training session for our teachers. For instance, one of the platforms that we use since is Google Classroom, so we have put training in place for them. But as well, our teachers are developing skills in order to upload to YouTube, how to share in OneDrive folders. So a lot of training opportunities came out from this planning. And it's all to do with ensuring that we look after our team. We cannot ask teachers to produce lots of resources and not giving the time, because this will obviously add stress and we didn't want that. So by having a rota system, teachers were able to spend a few days out of the class a week so that they were able to kind of video, prepare presentations and share experiences with other teachers. Okay, so let's take a look. How are we able to evaluate how effective our home learning provision is? For us, communication is the key for everything. We need to ensure that we communicate with parents, we communicate with our governors, and we communicate with all professionals involved. This allows us to get better at what we do. That allows us to evolve and allow us to identify what else do we need to put in place or what we need to change. And this system seems to be really effective because parents felt that they've been heard and teachers are able to act on it. We are obviously monitoring all our safeguarding systems, or everything that we got in place. We need to ensure that all those child protection children and CIN children are supported properly, and seeing what extra help we can offer them. We have been working with our speech and language therapist, our physiotherapist, our educational psychologist, and we are trying to become creative on the support that we can offer to our families. And this is an ongoing things. So we got meetings in place, and we got certain strategies that we are sharing across the organization to ensure we can do this effectively. What we can see here is some of the top tips that we have identified in order to ensure that we have a successful home learning provision in place. I would like to highlight a few of them as the key areas. It's always safeguarding is always the key for us. So safeguarding systems has to be in place, and teachers really need to understand all the new guidelines when we offer remote learning for families. Another area that we as a school are really strong or really believe is the key for us is well-being. Well-being support for everybody. We need to ensure that our teachers get supported. If there are difficult conversations to have with parents, we need to ensure that we've got things in place and systems in place to support that. And our deputy heads or head of site play a really important role as they are keeping contact with everybody on a daily basis. We have identified in working with our families that we have a great opportunity to work on personal care skills. The fact that every day those students that are at home will be accessing or having the opportunity to prepare their own meals, to go to the shop safely, to use the toilet. So we're just working and designing a specific program for those families to help them to understand how best support the young people at home. And the last one I wanted to highlight is the importance of having a really solid routine in place, including having physical exercise on a daily basis. And we have developed different type of timetable or weekly routines that you'll be able to see at the end of the presentation. Let's take a look at Downsview Home Learning Provision overview. Those are just some samples of some of the support that we offer to some students and families. We have been clear with teachers that we're not expecting for all the students to access all those areas, but this is just a guidance so they know ways that they can support. On the next page, we'll see two different samples of two different home learning provisions, and you can see the difference and how it's been kind of adjusted to every student's or individual needs. So let's take a look at the provision that we should be offering. The main thing to keep in mind is that all our students have different needs and that we need to adjust our home learning provision in order to ensure that we can meet our students' needs. The second point we'll be looking at is establishing what is the best way to support those students, and that will be done through conversation with parents and through conversation with other professionals involved with the students. We are clear that the provision that we are offering will look different for each class, but at the same time will look different for each student. And the only thing we're kind of asking all teachers is to ensure that we've got a timetable in place, so families has got a routine, that we've got clear target of what do we want to achieve each week, and that we have parental contact at least twice a week. And that can be done, as we mentioned earlier, through phone calls or through emails. And on the next page, we will have a look at an overview at the home learning provision that we are offering. Let's take a look at a couple of samples of home learning support that we're offering for a couple of students. I think if we just look at both of those samples, what we can see is that the common things in both is the support to families in terms of making sure that we do a phone call or email weekly, as well as informal targets. This is mostly so we are kind of aware of what we're trying to achieve on a weekly basis. We always ensure that we share with our families useful links. Those links are related to mental health support and other community activities that they can access or lessons that they can access.
Hey, it's Ian here at Studio TV. Thank you so much for joining us here at Getting It Right for Me Live. Let me ask you a really quick question. Are you here because you are hoping to develop your skills and your knowledge and all your learning and understanding around supporting and caring for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities? I assume that's what you've come here for. We hope that you're enjoying your time here with us. There's some amazing people and we're so grateful for them coming and being part of this. And we're so grateful for you to be joining us as well. There's a couple of things I just really quickly wanted to introduce you to. First of all, don't forget that you can upgrade your ticket at any time to one of the paid tickets, which we try to keep the price as low as we possibly can, just to cover what we need to help out the speakers a little bit and make sure this event is as good as it can be. What that means is you can access the live Q&A sessions that we're running throughout the event and you can access all the sessions for up to a year afterwards if you buy one of those paid tickets. Check out the whole school ones. How that works is if you book a whole school ticket, and you can pay online, or you can drop us a line and we'll issue an invoice and we'll sort it all out. That's absolutely fine. But we'll then make it possible for all your staff to be able to access all the sessions here at Getting It Right for Me Live this year. So do hope that's helpful. The other thing I want to mention is, and there are lots of members joining us this week, so thank you so much to those of you who are members, but we have put together, if you're looking to go deeper and access ongoing support and help and training, either as an individual, as a parent, as a professional supporting someone with additional needs, in a school or educational setting, or from a professional point of view, we have put together here at Studio TV with Lynn McCann and her team at Reach Out ASC a fantastic membership that starts at just £10 a month and includes a wide range of courses to help you support those in your care. There's a load of resources and tools, printable things that you can use to work with those children, support them. And there's more content being added all the time. One of my favorite parts of the membership is there is a peer group community that's built into that. So you can ask questions of Lynn and her team and your peers, built right into that membership as well. As I say, it starts at just £10 a month. Whole school memberships are there. We're offering trust-wide memberships, and local authorities have started to get in touch and offer this to their staff across a range of schools as well. We would love for you to join our community. If you've got any questions on that, drop us a line, but very much hope to see you there. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.